as if no one has ever had a terrible face-to-face class experience, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're holding this up as the gold standard. It's like, to imagine that online learning is some kind of monolith, that every online learning experience is the same. Well, do you expect every face-to-face learning experience to be the same? No, of course not.
Welcome to Hallway Conversations. We're a trio of educators who have plenty of questions about teaching and learning and school culture, and we believe in the value of collaboration and reflection as we seek to keep growing as teachers. So this podcast is our place for thinking out loud together about issues in education and why they might matter to Christian educators. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hallway Conversations. My name's Matt Beamers.
I'm Abby DeGroat.
And I'm Dave Mulder.
Richard Mao has a wonderful book titled The Life of the Mind. It's a short but important book, and I encourage you to read it. Chapter 11 in that book is one that I've read many times. It's titled Safe Spaces for Playing Around. And in that chapter, Mao says, quote, safe spaces are essential for intellectual explorations. Mao then goes on to share a vignette of having a hallway conversation with a colleague that often concluded with the colleague stating, well, I have to go back to my office to play around with a few ideas. I think those lines capture what we're trying to do here with hallway conversations. We're trying to create safe space for all of us to learn together and play around with a few ideas. And it's our deep hope that you might be encouraged to go back to your classroom, your staff room, or hallway and think more deeply about these things. If you're new to hallway conversations, one of us brings a question and we explore some of our thinking. Better yet, as much as we enjoy bringing our own questions, we relish getting questions from listeners. So we'd like to hear from you. Please email us or send us a recording of your question. We'll do our best to play around in the sandbox with it. Send your questions to hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. That's hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. Dave, this morning I do think we have a question from one of our listeners, why don't you share that?
All right, this came to us via email from Alex Van Dunkersgood, and Alex's question is this. In the pandemic, we suddenly saw schools scrambling to operate online. Many schools were not truly ready for this. When you look at the role of online in the realm of education, what do you see as its place in the fabric of what schools do?
Wow.
Yeah.
So as I read that question, I'm going back to my last year as an elementary school principal when the pandemic broke out. Mm-hmm. And so when Alex says schools were not ready, absolutely.
Yeah.
How could we have been ready? Like, maybe there's actually, and maybe there's an answer to how could we have been ready. Yeah. I just know
we were not.
We were not. Yeah. And yet, so just to give you a bit of my context, that whole pandemic broke out in spring of 2020. Mm-hmm. Wow, it's crazy. Yeah, the time and we were just heading into spring break as a school. And I can remember meeting as a leadership team and with different people, sending emails to teachers. We basically we were blessed, for lack of a better word, with the gift of time over spring break to get things ready. And it was a crazy time. It was an emotional time.
Definitely.
It took the physical and mental demands of that time, trying to wrap your head around what was going on with our work, what was going on with our personal lives. And I guess just as I hear that question, the first thing that I want to say is acknowledge I can say that we weren't ready, but we got ready. And in talking to other principals and school teachers about even that time in the last year and a half, I think it's important to say, as hard as it has been, like, I'm so proud of the work that so many school teachers have done. And that's why I think if I think about, like, how effective it is, I'm not even thinking about I'm just thinking, well done, everybody. It's been an exhausting time. And so I want to say that in a non-judgmental way. Way to go, everyone. This is the most unique time, at least in my career. The Lord willing, we never see anything like it again once we're through it. But wow, like, I just think hats off, everyone. Well done.
That said, though, you're kind of like, I hope we never have to see it. Like, I hope we never have to see this kind of scramble ever again.
Right.
But I wonder about this, and in response to Alex's question, right? So my field is ed tech, and online teaching and learning is one of my areas of focus. One of the things that if I know some things about something, this is one of the things I know.
Yeah.
But I always want to say to people who if they're making judgments about online learning based on their pandemic experience, that was not online learning, at least not the way it's supposed to be. That was emergency remote teaching. And just as your story indicates, Matt, like that scramble that we all felt, and like, holy cow, the things that teachers and administrators did to make it happen. Oh my goodness, it's amazing.
And
it's
continue
amazing.
to make it happen. We are not done.
That's right. That's right. But that's not how it's supposed to be. And so that's I would gently, kindly push forward on that. That if we're going to try to judge online learning based on this experience, this isn't it. This is not it.
Right.
No. This is everyone doing the best they can
in a horrible situation.
In a very unique context. Sorry.
And I think too, like if you've been in a program that's designed online, you can very starkly see the differences.
Well, right, because your program that you're just completing was online.
Mine was a hybrid in some ways because we did meet face to face for a week right away towards the beginning of the program, but all of our coursework was online.
Right.
And like you said, when it's done well, like it was incredibly rich learning, right?
Totally.
That you could learn at the doctoral level that way. I think it can be scaffolded to all ages. That gets difficult primary, right? Yep. But I did have a first grader during the pandemic.
Right.
That she did really good things.
Right.
She learned some things. And so I think that's a really good point that we have to keep in mind. My online learning experiences have all been phenomenal.
Yeah.
As a student.
Right. It's interesting that you say that, Abby, because I have the pleasure and the privilege of teaching both face-to-face and online. So I get to experience both. And I think one of the things that, true confessions, like my back can get up a bit now when I hear people talk about and I'm not talking about in an online pandemic experience. I'm talking like in a truly rich online learning environment, that somehow the learning that happens in a face-to-face classroom is deeper or more important, or that, even relationally is richer than what happens online. And that's I struggle with that, because I think not just me, I think people I know who teach online work pretty hard to be very intentional, not only about providing rich and meaningful learning experiences, but also developing rich and meaningful relationships.
Definitely.
And my experience, like yours, has been, wow, like I have some dear friends that I've created through online learning experience, and will be dear and will be friends for a long time, and professors who have become mentors. So I think part of it, as I'm reflecting on this, and Dave, maybe you can speak to it, is somehow that a truly an online learning experience is substandard in face-to-face. And I don't know, like, what are your thoughts on that? Because
get me all wound up.
Because that has not been my experience as a professor, or at least it doesn't. My students could maybe say different, but that has not been my experience.
But I would okay. So in the ed tech field, this is an ongoing complaint that we have about people denigrating as if no one has ever had a terrible face-to-face class experience, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're holding this up as the gold standard. It's like to imagine that online learning is some kind of monolith, that every online learning experience is the same. Well, do you expect every face-to-face learning experience to be the same? No, of course not. Yeah. So there's actually this whole collection, going back to the 1940s, actually, of what we call media comparison studies. Yeah. And so, like, today we would say, is face-to-face better or is online learning better? Well, in the 40s it was, is learning face-to-face better or is learning via radio better? And like, it's the same conversation. They were having it 70 years ago, 80 years ago. It
depends. The answer is always it depends.
Right?
Yeah.
And can you have a terrible face-to-face experience? Yup. Can you have a terrible online learning experience? Yup. It doesn't have to be.
But it's not the medium.
That's right. It's not the medium. And so the argument is, it's kind of like the delivery truck model, right? Like, we're talking about the groceries that are inside the delivery truck. Like, the quality of what you actually learn is the same. Like, there's no significant... Sorry, I'm going to sound like a tech researcher for a second, but they call it the no significant difference phenomenon. What you learn is the same. Like, there's no significant difference statistically. It's the same. Yeah. Does that mean the experience is the same? Well, no, but face-to-face learning experiences are not the same. Yeah. So let's not set that up as some imaginary gold standard then, right?
And so the learning is the same, and so the relationships are going to be different, of course, because they're going to have a different. But that doesn't mean, again, it's going to be less than or more than. And I think that also depends on what you put into it, both as a professor and as a student, right? Like, say, do I want to develop relationships with these students in an online environment? And there's different ways to do that. Like,
absolutely.
You know, like and again, not that it has to be the way, but I know for myself, we meet every other Wednesday for 90 minutes. But part of that is check-in questions. Like even with adults, check-in questions. How are we doing? Breakout rooms where we're developing relationships. A couple weeks ago, hey, sign up for a 15, 20-minute one-on-one Zoom so I can just learn more about you. Like, let's build relationship. I think you do things around, I think you call them happy hours.
Happy hour,
right? Like,
drinks are on you.
Totally. So, so there is different ways.
Yeah, and interestingly, I've also found that I think I was kind of afraid with my program that because we started online and then we met face to face, I was kind of worried that those relationships wouldn't transfer to like face to face situations, and was completely wrong about that, right? Like the people, like people are people.
Yes.
Whether they are writing things or speaking, right? They're still them, and so I have found that the relationships hold.
I would agree.
Across mediums.
So I found something very similar. My doctoral program similarly was online. While we were students, our professors encouraged us to all come to a particular conference, and so we did. A bunch of us came, like 8 people from my cohort came to this conference. And so we'd already had a year of classes together, and we'd never met up face to face. I mean, we'd had Zoom meetings, or we had a back channel that we kept in touch with. Now you actually sit down and have a drink with somebody, and it's like, wow, you're the same person that you were online.
Exactly.
Shockingly, right? Shockingly.
And so I think so much of it comes back to our intentionality to communicate and our intentionality to become a community of learners, a community of inquiry together. And does that solve everything? Well, no. Like a face-to-face class, right? Is it possible for students to just kind of opt out and hang out in the background and try not to get called on? Sure. Does it happen online? Sure. Right. No, for sure. So I don't know. Coming back to the
same problems exist in both places.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there's ways that we can address that as an instructor, right? Like, are there ways you can build an assignment that it demands some sense of collaboration? Sure. We do that in face-to-face class. You can do that in online class as well.
Dave, one of my questions, I'm going to put you on the spot here then, is if you think about, so you sort of noted the difference between like the online learning in a pandemic versus like online learning, like in terms of, so if you think about, so now thinking not the pandemic, but just kind of online learning environments, what for you would be some hallmarks or characteristics then, like to make a program stronger, like kind of foundational pieces to a successful online learning environment?
So I think one thing right away is the planning and preparation piece of it. We've got to plan really well. Can you build the plane while you're flying it? Yes. And I've done it. I've taught an online course while I'm creating, so I'm just trying to stay 2 weeks ahead of the students. Way better learning experience for both the instructor and the students if you can build the thing before, right? Okay. So you can set clear learning targets and then align all of your instructional activities to those targets and saying, we're going to make sure we hit these targets. You can plan for the collaboration piece. You can plan for interaction that way. So that would be one thing, the planning and prep side. The second thing is, I think, an intentionality in the way that you design things so that there is lots of opportunity for collaboration, communication, using different channels. Today, 20 years ago, it was a different conversation for online courses. It was almost all text-based, right? And like, it sounds funny to think like the world before YouTube, but YouTube has allowed for a lot more possibilities. Even in fact, I mean, not just consuming videos, but the fact that we can pretty easily create our own videos now. So for instructors, you can have a lot more social presence in your class by just showing your face and like in your own words, like students go. So that's something I prioritize. But then I do the same. I have my students create videos. So using Flipgrid, we talked about a couple weeks ago. That's a great tool. Create short video clips where you can give a video prompt and the students can respond with video so they can see and hear each other, even asynchronously. We don't all have to log in at the same time, although that can be a great way to do it too. I'm thinking about our master's program that I teach in. Like literally this semester, I've got students in, I'm quick counting, 5 different countries around the world. Right. So it's impossible for us to have a time where we can all meet at the same time.
And that's also the advantage, right? The question was, what's the place in the fabric of education, right? For online. And that's the beauty of online.
Totally. Totally.
Right? So when we think
breaks
about
down
like
time and
we
space.
talked about how it's quality, right? Kind of defended it a little bit, but I don't think we've gone into like the advantages.
Benefits, that's right.
Right?
And to me, that is one of the big benefits, right? Like suddenly access becomes different, right? Instead of being constrained by time and space, there's a lot more opportunity for us to connect regardless of what time zone you're in. And so do you have to plan for that? Well, yeah. I mean, like, I'm not going to plan a lot of required synchronous activities because somebody's going to get up at 2 a.m. then. And like, that's terrible. That's not a great learning experience.
Right? That's not hospitable either.
Well, for sure. Yeah, and then I guess the other thing is to think about assessment in an online learning experience, right? And I think a lot of times people immediately think, well, all I can do is like ask multiple choice questions on a timed test or something like that, so I can try to control, the outcomes of that. I think that's a terrible
especially if you get into like those testing programs that like watch students.
Right. Like
I have a lot of questions about that.
Student surveillance piece, like I have concerns about that. And I know people want to, maintain integrity of their testing but
there are other forms of assessment that can work better.
And I would say then to be really intentional is keep that learning target. What are you aiming for?
Yep.
What possible ways are there for students to demonstrate that they hit that target? And things that are going to be more project-oriented, that are going to demand personalization of the response to it, that they're going to put themselves into the work and demonstrate that they have come away learning it. Those are going to make it more enjoyable for the student. And frankly, for me as a teacher, I much prefer to see students work when it's authentic, real work that they care about.
Yeah, but maybe that holds true also for face-to-face.
I mean, I would make the argument.
No, right? Like, I mean, in terms of like authentic assessment experiences, right? Like,
that's right.
So maybe the question that we need to start asking is, what can we learn from online that actually would be a benefit and a blessing to our face-to-face instead of saying actually what are we losing? What can we gain from online that might actually be transferable in face-to-face? And I'm wondering if assessment's one of those pieces.
I would say so.
We did a podcast a few weeks ago about protocols, right? Like you can use some of those in online. Like we've done it in breakout rooms in terms of giving kind, specific, helpful feedback. I just think if you're willing to be innovative and creative in person, I think that's also transferable to online. And it's sort of like, and if you're intentional with your relationship building in class, you're probably going to be intentional online. And so I think there's more overlap there than what we realize. Friends, we know that your time is valuable, and we want to thank you for playing around in the sandbox with us. We hope that the Lord gives you what you stand in need of this week. Finally, we'd like to send you into your day and week with this blessing. So to our listeners, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace, and give you peace, and give you peace. Amen. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have a good week.
This podcast was quite literally dreamed up during one of our actual hallway conversations. Our music is by Ethan Mulder. Hallway Conversations is an independent podcast created and produced by Matt Beamers, Abby DeGroat, and Dave Mulder. Thanks for listening.